Record knock for Dexter as Leicestershire dominate day one. Gloucestershire travelled to Leicester looking for a second win of the season to try and keep some pressure on the sides vying for second place in the division. Unbeaten this term, the side from the southwest faced an erratic team in the shape of Leicestershire, who'd not won since the opening round of the season back in April. The toss was uncontested and Gloucestershire elected to bowl, and that looked to be a very sensible decision as the host skipper Horton was removed in the fourth over, edging behind off Sayers for a 6-ball duck. Dexter was the new man in to join Azad, and he hit the first boundary of the game, a delightful on-drive down the ground. Azad picked up his first boundary of the day with a shot through cover, and the pair started to build a decent foundation. He then pillaged 4 consecutive boundaries off Higgins to bring up the 50 partnership, and that moved himself within range of a half-century too. He duly brought up his 50 in the next Higgins over, and after what had been a pretty disastrous start to the day, the Foxes reached lunch on 89 for 1. Into the afternoon session, and Dexter continued to push the scoreboard along, taking the team's total past 100 in the process. The runs came with ease, Azad joining Dexter on a half-century, his coming at a slightly slower run rate as Leicestershire moved past 150. 1 over later, Dexter moved to 3 figures, coming off just 136 balls, and he showed no sign of relenting, a few overs later hitting Van Buren for the first 6 of the game. The first batting point was chalked up shortly afterwards, and the next milestone reached by the pair was setting a new second wicket partnership record against Gloucestershire as they hurtled past the previous best of 153 set back in 1979. Into the evening session, and Gloucestershire's misery in the field continued as Azad and Dexter forged ahead. Dexter brought up his 150, and Azad moved to his 100, his maiden first-class ton. Dexter then moved to his career best total as a drive through the offside once again went to the rope, his previous best of 163 erased from the history books in the process. The 300 came up with further batting points secured, but then Gloucestershire finally broke the partnership. Azad the man to go as he edged behind off Payne for a fantastic 137. 326 for 2 became 332 for 3 as Dexter's mammoth knock came to an end. Roderick again with the catch, this time off Shaw, Dexter out for 180. Wright was the new man in, coming to the crease to join Cosgrove as night watchman, but it wasn't long before he had a new partner out in the middle as Shaw struck again, Cosgrove out for 1. Davis was caught by dent off Sayers for 2, as a late flurry of wickets gave Gloucestershire some hope heading into day 2. But at the close, still, it was very much Leicestershire's day. At stumps they were 343 for 5, Wright and Ackerman, the not-out batsmen. A Bass blitz complements huge first innings total for Leicestershire. Gloucestershire's decision to put Leicestershire in had looked to be the sensible one when Horton fell in the 4th over of the morning. However, thereafter it had been Leicestershire's batsmen who dominated, in particular Dexter and Azad, the former making his highest ever first-class score of 180 and the latter his first ever first-class ton. The home team did lose a few wickets late on, but were still in a very strong position at the close on day 1, 343 for 5. Ackerman and night watchman Wright were the men who resumed on the second morning, and Wright's stay at the crease was a short one as he edged to howl in the slips off Sayers for 6. Ackerman was joined by Dearden in the middle, with the South African striking the first boundary of the day off Payne. The total moved to 350, the Foxes chalking up their 4th batting point of the innings, and Dearden was soon finding the rope as well as the home side continued to motor on. At the end of the 110th over, Leicestershire had moved to 380, so they knew they'd have to settle for just the 4 bonus points from their innings. Gloucestershire finally broke this useful partnership when Dearden was caught behind offshore for 21. Hill was the new man in, and he took Leicestershire past 400 with a couple of quick boundaries, and he and Ackerman secured a rapid 50 partnership. Their fine work together saw the hosts arrive at lunch on 441 for 7. Hill went just after the resumption of play, caught out by Van Buren off Payne for 44, but Ackerman completed a fine 50 as Leicestershire went to 471 for 8. Shaw trapped Klein LBW for 12, and then Mohamed Abbas was bowled for a duck by Dent to wrap up a superb first innings for the hosts. Ackerman still unbeaten on 56, Leicestershire's total 487. Shaw the pick of the Gloucestershire bowlers with 4 wickets. In reply, Gloucestershire immediately found themselves in bother as Abbas had Hammond caught behind for 4 in just the 5th over. An early tea was then taken as the weather closed in, Gloucestershire 16 for 1. 2 balls after the restart, Abbas struck again, Bracey LBW for 4, and the Pakistani international then put himself on a hat-trick as Roderick was caught behind. Rain continued to blight play for the rest of the evening though, and eventually the umpires called stumps with Gloucestershire 41 for 3. Dent and Howell, the not-out batsmen, on 15 and 16 respectively, Gloucestershire 446 runs behind with just 7 first innings wickets remaining. It is very much advantage Leicestershire heading into day 3. Higgins and Dent power Gloucestershire into unlikely first innings lead. Leicestershire closed at the midpoint of their game against Gloucestershire in a strong position. After posting a massive 487 from their first innings, they'd reduced their visitors to 41 for 3 at the close, and it was Dent and Howell who picked things up on the third morning, looking to reduce the deficit that sat at 446. They found the boundary with increasing regularity after a cautious start, and Howell in particular was scoring freely. He brought up his half-century, and the partnership was worth 77 when Leicestershire finally managed to snap it. Howell going caught Ackerman bowled right for 52. Taylor joined Dent at the crease and the duo brought up the 100 for the visitors. Skipper Dent moved to his 50, but needed a new partner before lunch when Taylor was bowled by a beautiful swinging delivery from Davis for just 5. At the break, Gloucestershire were 131 for 5. Into the afternoon, and Dent and Higgins started to build a really solid partnership. They pushed the scoring along at a decent run rate, picking up boundaries when they were on offer, and they cruised past their 50 partnership, taking the overall score past 200 not long afterwards, with Dent closing in on a century and Higgins a 50. Higgins became the third Gloucestershire batsman past the 50 mark, and Dent brought up his 100 with a delightful little mini ramp round the corner for 4. His first 3-figure score of the season. He continued to push on after reaching his milestone, and Higgins looked likely to succeed him with a century of his own as he came to tea on 82. Gloucestershire 306 for 5, and the concerns surrounding their innings at the start of the day a far and distant memory. Into the evening, and Higgins didn't take too long to move to a century of his own. He's most certainly the form batsman for his county, as it was his second century in as many games, putting him top of the Gloucestershire batting averages, and by the end of the day he would also have augmented his position in the division as a whole to 5th, as well as cruising past his previous personal best of 119 not out. He's most certainly the form batsman for his county, as it was a second century in as many games, putting him top of the Gloucestershire batting averages, and by the end of the day he would have also augmented his position in the division as a whole to 5th, as well as cruising past his previous personal best of 119 not out. Runs continued to flow with ease, and in amongst the boundaries Gloucestershire moved to 350. Then Dent went to 150, and the pair successfully guided the score past the follow-on target before bringing it up to 400. With 5 batting points safely in the bag, the pair set about overhauling the Leicestershire total. Higgins sailed to his 150, but with Dent on 176, Dent was bowled by Klein to give Leicestershire some welcome relief. Although it wasn't exactly a relief, as the new man in, Van Buren, was in no mood for idling around. Higgins set the tone with a 6 off Klein, and the 24-year-old moved into the 190s before Van Buren decided to end the day with a flourish, cracking Ackerman to the ropes 3 times in an over to move Gloucestershire into the lead. They reached the close on 503 for 6, a lead of 16, with 4 first innings wickets intact, heading into day 4. Honours even as Azad and Horton bag centuries. Skipper Chris Dent and Ryan Higgins had both scored exceptional centuries for Gloucestershire on day 3, putting their team remarkably into a first innings lead at close. Higgins still at the crease, closing in on his double century. The score at the resumption was 503 for 6, a lead of 17, with Higgins not out on 196. His start was nervous, and it was his partner Van Buren who struck the first boundary of the morning. Higgins moved on to 199, but he failed to convert it into a double hundred as Wright bowled him on the opening delivery of the third over of the morning, and Higgins' 5-hour and 7-minute stay at the crease had come to an end. An innings that had seen the 24-year-old strike 25 fours and a 6. Payne joined Van Buren, and they continued to move things along. Van Buren crashed his way into the 40s, but then fell, bowled by Klein for 43. .545 for 8 became 559 for 9, when Shaw was LBW to Klein, the bowler's third wicket of the innings. And Sayers was the last man out. Klein again the wicket-taker, bowling Sayers for 3, putting a wrap on the Gloucestershire innings at 571, a lead of 84 runs. So Leicestershire started their second innings with a tricky period to survive through to lunch. Horton was the first to find the boundary, but that effort was quickly followed up by his fellow opener Azad, looking in the same form that had seen him score a maiden first-class century earlier in the match. They continued well through to the lunch interval, the score 35 without loss, and the Foxes already whittling the deficit down to 49. It would be the same story as the game restarted. Gloucestershire's bowlers frustrated as Horton and Azad continued to pile on the runs. They'd reach level pegging before long, with both men closing in on half-centuries. Horton's would come with a single run down to third man off Howell, and Azad wasn't far behind. He'd follow up his first innings exploits with a half-century of his own, a quickly run single bringing up the latest milestone just before tea. They went in at the break, having negotiated the session without loss and having wiped out Gloucestershire's advantage. And the Foxes would find further success as they resumed after the interval. Gloucestershire bowlers toiled, looking to get something out of a wicket that had done little to help the attack, as Horton and Azad began to fill their boots. With the match heading for a draw, both openers were playing for themselves and cruised past 200 with ease. Horton's 100 came with a single off Hammond, his 24th in first-class cricket. And Azad would write his name into the history books, becoming the 13th Leicestershire player to score 100 in both innings, and the first since Ned Eckersley back in 2016. With that, the captains agreed to shake hands, the match ending in a draw, leaving Gloucestershire with 12 points, Leicestershire with 11. Over 1,200 runs had been scored in the match, with 600s made. Azad and Horton's partnership of 211, a record for Leicestershire against Gloucestershire. The Foxes will now be hoping to continue their fine form next week when they travel to Northampton, whilst Gloucestershire face Glamorgan back in Bristol.
Oh.